Hello, my math geniuses. This is going to be a study guide review for mid-chapter 2. Okay, question number 1 on our study guide wanted us to convert these fractions into decimals. And whenever you're talking about moving from fraction to decimal, it's all about place value. So what you want to do is simplify these fractions first, then you can turn them into their decimals. Because you want to get a place value number in your denominator. So either like a 10 or 100 or 1,000. So the best way to go about this is to simplify first. So if I simplify 6/8, I would divide by 2, and I end up with 3/4. So 3/4 is the same thing as 3/4, which looks like 0.75 as a decimal. But just to show how we would get that place value number, I'd multiply 4 times 25, and it gives me 100. 3 times 25 gives me 75, so I have 75 hundredths here, which is the same thing as 0.75. For 4/16, I would want to simplify by dividing by 4. I end up with 1/4 this time, which 1/4 is 0.25, or 25 cents. But again, to show that denominator of 100 for you, 4 times 25 is 100. 1 times 25 is 25. 25 hundredths is 0.25. So always try to simplify first, then go up to that place value denominator if you can, like a 10 or 100 or 1,000. Okay, this question, what is 0.45 plus 0.2 plus 0.10 as a fraction? Well, there's a little bit of math involved here. I got to be able to add these decimals together and then write that decimal number as a fraction in simplest form. So I know when I add fractions, the rule I must follow is that I align all of my decimal places and my decimal points. So if I have a 0.2 here, the 2 is in the tenths place. It has to be underneath the 4, which is in the tenths place of 0.45. And I can add a 0 to fill that empty space on the end. I got one more number here. Again, that 1 is in the tenths place, so it needs to align in the tenths place, and add a 0 to fill the empty spot. So when we add these together, 5 plus 0 is 5. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. You bring your decimal straight down, and you end up with 0.75. But the question, I'm not quite done, because it asked me to write that as a fraction. So 0.75 as a fraction is 75 hundredths, okay? Because the 5 is in the hundredths place. That's where you get your denominator. And then what's behind the decimal goes on top. This, however, is not simplified yet. Their greatest common factor is 25. So you would end up with 3/4 once you fully simplified. So you need to make sure you follow decimal rules when you're adding. Line up your decimals, line up all your place values, then bring your decimals straight down when you add. Then convert that number to its fraction by using the place value. Okay, number 3. If 45% of kids don't like Fusaklis, what fraction of kids do like Fusaklis? So first off here, I got at least a 2-step problem. They gave me the percent of kids that do not like Fusaklis, and they asked for the fraction of kids that do, okay? So if I know that 45% of kids do not, I got to figure out what percent of kids do. So percents are always out of 100. So if I know that 45% of that 100% don't like it, I can subtract it from the 100 here, and I do a little bit of math. So we end up with 55% of kids that do like Fusaklis rather than do not. So then I need to turn 55% into a fraction, which we know that percents are always out of 100. So that's 55 over 100. I want to simplify. I end up with 11 over 20. There's my final answer. So don't just jump on that 45% in this one. You got to read the question. 45% of kids do not like Fusaklis. What fraction do like Fusaklis? I had to figure out what percent first. do like Fusaklis, and then turn that number into its fraction. So be careful when you're reading those word problems. All right, convert each percent to a fraction. Remember, we just did a problem like this. Percents are always out of 100 to start off with, and then you just got to simplify. So I know that the greatest common factor of 28 and 100 is 4. So I would divide by 4. I end up with 7/25. That's my final answer for that one. Can't be simplified any further. For 60%, I end up with 60 over 100. I want to simplify this. I know the greatest common factor is 20. I end up with 3/5 as my final answer. And for 42%, that's 42 over 100. This one I can only divide by 2. End up with 21 over 50. Okay, number 5, we wrote each percent as a decimal. This is one of my favorite things to do here, going from percent to decimal and decimal to percent. So I always think of the alphabet. If the word percent starts with the letter P, and I'm at the P in the alphabet, and decimal starts with the letter D, I have to move to the left to get from P for percent to D decimal. I just need to remember how many places to move it, and it's always 2. So I would grab this decimal where it is, go over 1, 2 swoops. So the new decimal location is going to be in between the 6 and the 7. And I get 6.742. For this next one, I'm going to grab the decimal where it is. I have 1, 2 swoops over. Well, I notice I have an empty swoop. Whenever that is the case, you got to put a 0 in there. So I'm going to end up with 0.0829. And one more, going from percent to decimal, P to D, I got to swoop it over 1, 2 spots to the left, because this was a whole number. I know it was behind this 2 is where its decimal place would be. So the new location is going to be in front of the first 2 for 0.22. Okay, convert each fraction to a percent. Got to remember, anytime we're dealing with percents, percents are out of 100. So if I can convert that denominator to be 100, that's what I got to do. So 25 times 4 gives me 100 here. So 14 times 4 gives me 56. Once I have that number over 100, I just need to write that number in the numerator with the percent sign behind it. So that would be 56%. Same here. I can easily multiply 50 times 2 to get 100. If I multiply 8 times 2, I get 16. So 16 over 100 is 16%. Alright, what is 37% as a decimal? And then what is 37% as a fraction? So I think of percents and decimals and fractions as all being types of fruit, right? But they're all a different flavor of fruit. Like a percent could be a pineapple. A decimal could be a regular apple. A fraction could be an orange. But they all have the same value. They're all types of fruit, but they have a different format that they're coming in. So 37% as a decimal, we remember our rules to swipe it over. It equals 0.37. And then that as a fraction, if I'm thinking about 37 hundredths, that 7 is in the hundredth place. So each of these are equivalent to each other. 37% is equal to 0.37. It's also equal to 37 over 100. They're all the same value. They're just coming in a different flavor of number. Okay, a couple more. Number 8, they wanted what is 0.045 as a fraction in simplest form. So we haven't had a place value this far yet, but that 5 is in the thousandth place. So I have 1,000 as my denominator this time. The 45 goes up top. And then I just have to simplify. I know this number ends in a 5 and this number ends in a 0. So 5 is going to go into both of these. When I divide 45 by 5, I get 9. When I divide 1,000 by 9, I get 200. And that is simplified. No other number but 1 will go into 9 and 200. Okay, last one here. Now we're going from decimal to percent. That's from D to P. So we're going to the right 2 swoops this time. So I'm going to grab that decimal where it is. I'm going to go over 2 place values. So the new decimal location would be behind the second 4 here. So it's going to be a whopping 3,474% for the second one. Grab that decimal where it is. 2 swoops, 1, 2. That's going to be 31%. And then finally, got one down here, 1, 2. Remember, anytime you have an empty swoop, you got to put a 0 there. So we got another 2,190%. So guys, watch this video as much as you need. Get ready for that test. I know you're doing great. Keep up the good work.